I'm Fernando Guerra, professor and director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University and moderator of the Center's Urban Lecture Series. This year marks the culmination of several important events for our city. In addition to this being the 10th annual lecture series the Center has organized, it's also the university's 100th anniversary of serving Los Angeles with its educational experience. Also this year, the city will remember the tragedy of the 1992 riots that occurred 20 years ago. As Angelenos, we should not forget both the physical and emotional scars these disturbances had on our city. For this reason, the Center for the Study of LA is sponsoring a survey of Los Angeles residents and their attitudes and opinions over the last 20 years. This survey will assist our faculty, students, and policymakers to better understand Los Angeles. Since no picture is complete without looking at the past, present, and future, the topic of this year's lecture series is 20 years after the riots, where is LA now? Where we hear from several of the city's current leaders, as well as those running for mayor of Los Angeles in the 2013 election. The series is important for several reasons. It provides an interdisciplinary education to hundreds of students at Loyola Marymount University, and it brings together top government officials, business and community leaders, and students, and the general public to discuss pressing issues facing Los Angeles and solutions to the city's problems. We hope you enjoy today's panel. For more information about the Center for the Study of LA, its research studies, or upcoming panels, please visit our website at www.lmu.edu/CSLA. Welcome to Loyola Marymount University. I'm Fernando Guerra, professor and director of the Center for the Study of Los Angeles. We are obviously celebrating the 100th anniversary of Loyola Marymount University. This is also the 10th anniversary of the Urban Lecture Series. And of course, with our guests, we'll be discussing 20 years of the city after the unrest, the riots, or the disturbances. To have that discussion with us is Jan Perry, current council member representing the 9th District. Jan was born in Cleveland, started her education there, but then transferred to a university in Los Angeles that I will not name. USC. She got her BA at USC. Then, of course, began her activism like many people do in terms of real local politics. She was, I think, the president of her homeowners association, and then she got involved and was hired by council member Mike Wu as a planning deputy. And then became chief of staff to a council member, Rita Walters, in the 9th District. And then after that, replaced her at the city council, was first elected in 2001, re-elected in 2005, re-elected in 2009, and now term limits is forcing her out, but she's taking this opportunity to run for mayor of Los Angeles. In March 5th, 2013 will be the election, and she will be a candidate for mayor. Why do you want to be mayor?
I like to serve. I like to help people. I like to solve their problems. I like to build. I like to build for growth. I like to help people recover their neighborhoods and reclaim their history, and I find it very fulfilling.
So when you think about Los Angeles, let me just get to this particular question. 20 years ago, we had the riots or disturbances, and it depends on what your perspective is, where you were, when you look at it. I actually call them both because I think both happened at different times within those 3 or 4 days. But when you think about it, what do you remember most 20 years ago in terms of the riots?
Well, I remember the verdict in the Rodney King trial, and I was out with my then boss, Mike Wu, and we were over at First AME over there on 2200 block of Harvard, and I remember looking south and not only smelling the smoke and hearing the sirens and seeing transformers, blow up, but looking at the sadness in people's face. At the time, Pastor Murray was the senior pastor, and he had tears in his eyes, and people were running and screaming down the street, and I had to go get the car, and I told Mike, there was a lot of tensions then between different ethnic groups, and I said, let me go get the car, because it was just easier for me to do it. And I went down, and there were people in the street, and they acknowledged me, and I went and got the car, and I was unscathed. And we drove back down to City Hall, and I remember looking around City Hall, and it was just berserk. It's hard to even imagine. There was smoke everywhere and people hanging out of cars screaming at the top of their lungs, and it was just an out-of-control situation. And I mean, I know people were here for the Watts riots, and I wasn't here. I was too young. But it made my heart just stop.
So what relevance does that, what happened in Los Angeles 20 years ago, obviously had an impact on the city in terms of urban policy, but most of the students here were either just born or not even born. A freshman was born in 1992, 1993. So most of these are juniors and seniors. They were, born in 1990. They were a year or two old. Why should they care about what happened 20 years ago?
Because I think we're still in a very fragile state as a city. I think that relationships between people's communities, they're still not where they should be. There's still not enough depth to them or breadth. I think it's really important that as we move forward in a city, that everyone's community has the opportunity to feel optimistic, to look forward to growth, to look forward to simple things like grocery stores, or to have a library or a park, and that they should have the expectation that when their children go to school, they should be able to come home alive and not have to, duck for cover or worse, and that everybody's child has to have a chance to have a decent education. And so the reason that you should care is because you can influence that. And I feel, I have a 20-year-old daughter, so I feel very encouraged about the future because you communicate differently. You care in ways that we didn't necessarily care when we were your age. You have greater access to information than we ever did. And you have a great opportunity to not only direct your own future, but I think to influence us and to push us in another direction.
What caused the riots? I mean, we know it was the verdict. The verdict where the jury up in Simi Valley said not guilty to the officers that were caught on videotape beating up Rodney King. But that in itself didn't cause it. What were the underlying causes?
I think a disengagement, not only at the judicial level and the legislative level, and that I think local government and people in service, they didn't really have a handle on how people really feel, and that they feel this great sense of, or felt this great sense of anger, unsettled, lack of hope, because there's basic things missing in their respective communities, and that there was nothing coming on the horizon at that point.
Do you think another riot could happen, let's say in the next 5 years? Are the underlying conditions there?
I think our relationships are still fragile. I think our economy, our local economy here is still very tenuous. I think we have to be able to demonstrate that progress has been made in a real way, but we have to communicate it to people so that they actually believe it, they can feel it, they can experience it, and that people are getting jobs here.
So, yes or no? Riot in 5 years?
I wouldn't, I don't know. I don't like, that's it's such an emotional question that I wouldn't even begin to speculate, because we're talking about not only our future, but their future. I remember the night that it happened, and I called this friend of mine, because I was supposed to meet a group of people with the Anti-Defamation League that night. And I called her name, she's since retired, her name was Marjorie Green. And I felt so disconnected and so alone, and she was only just across town. But I was describing to her what was going on, and I said, I don't know, I don't know when I'm going to see you. This is out of control. And it wasn't like that where she was much further west. But we were in the same city,
Yeah.
you know?
So when Well, in thinking about the city in general, and then your district in particular, is the city right now going in the right direction?
I think budget-wise, we're probably not going in the best direction that we can, and that it's a battle, and sometimes it's a lonely battle, because we've got a lot of different things going on here in our local governance structure. Term limits have kicked in. People now make decisions based on what's good for them in the short term, but not what is necessarily best for the city in the long run, because they'll be termed out and they'll be gone. And they won't be accountable, and they won't be around to face the consequences of their decision. A few years ago, we were teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. We were able to pull back because we did some pretty serious things. We laid people off, we furloughed people, we asked people to take early retirement. And now we are engaged in the struggle that you see all over the country in all cities and all municipalities, which is healthcare costs and pension issues.
So when I think about your district, it's one of the most diverse districts, and I'm talking about your current district, the 9th.
Now it's
right,
not
but you will not represent that. That new district doesn't come into effect until
this summer.
This summer, and that district has downtown. It has South Los Angeles. It has been historically African American, but now it's probably the most Latino district in the city. How's that district doing? And is that going in the right direction?
Well, now it's not, and actually I referred to my district as a coalition district. I'm a 3-term councilwoman who represented a Latino district since 2001, and the population was predominantly Latino. The reason that I fought so hard to keep downtown connected to the southern part of the district is because I was always able to leverage property tax revenue or tax increment or fees generated by all of the new construction in the northern part of the district to be able to build housing in Skid Row, 5,000 units for people who are in need of permanent supportive housing, or to build it South family housing. And now that economic nexus has been severed, the median income now in South Los Angeles in my district is now $16,000 to $24,000 a year. When downtown was attached to it, it was much higher, was over $50,000
So let me understand this though. Yeah, I understand the theory about downtown has wealthier residents, has all kinds of great institutions, et cetera. Let's link it to South LA, the rest of the 9th district, and that will help with the economic development. But why can't it still do that? It's part of the city in general.
Yeah.
You know, why can't that still occur?
There's a couple of simple explanations. The first of which is I had probably 8 redevelopment areas in my district when downtown was tied to South LA. And so as tax increment, property tax revenue, was generated based on new construction, even in downtown, I could always make a finding of economic benefit or that economic connection to the north and the south, and then take that revenue generated and spend it in the southern part of the district to subsidize housing or to subsidize a facade improvement program on Central Avenue, or to subsidize housing on top of a grocery store. So I have 2 new grocery stores on Central Avenue south of Washington, and they both have housing on top. So I used all of that revenue because downtown was growing and expanding, and because I represented those areas, it was under my jurisdiction to be able to generate that and push that revenue south. Now that I no longer represent the economic engine for South LA, I have no economic engine. So that's why the median income is now poverty level. When you look at the map, as it will be once these maps take effect, it looks like a tsunami came through the district and scraped everything off.
So the idea, I think, for the students to understand is the people are the same, but the districts are drawn in terms of the resources. And when I think about the builders of Los Angeles, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, you are one of the top individuals in that you have helped facilitate LA Live, all kinds of different other projects, not only downtown but elsewhere. And we just don't find where the development or the building of things is occurring as much in Los Angeles to the degree it was under your leadership in Los Angeles.
It's because I was receptive to it, but I also did something else that a lot of people are not aware of. I looked at Skid Row, or I look at Skid Row as a community that wants the same thing that everyone else's community wants. Housing, they want clean streets, they want parks, places for people to be safe, and it is a recovery community. So a lot of the revenue that I generated from those large projects you mentioned went into Skid Row. And one of the most interesting projects that I worked on was something called the Downtown Women's Center. It's interesting for a couple of reasons. For the students who are here in urban studies or urban policy, it is a permanent supportive housing project in a former manufacturing building next door to a market rate condominium project. Now in this city, from a land use standpoint, that's almost unheard of. Anytime somebody tries to locate homeless housing next door to people who are living in market rate housing, people usually go absolutely crazy. But through good design, through landscaping, through good operation, through working with the neighbors and outreach, these projects are coexisting side by side. And so far, it's been not only a tremendous learning opportunity and how you can redevelop the inner core of your city and to make it truly a socioeconomic diverse experience, but to provide stable housing and begin to mainstream people off of Skid Row and to be able to create a kind of seamless transition into the greater community.
And I would imagine that it was easier also because the residents of downtown LA are newer to downtown LA. Like over more than half of the residents weren't there before in terms of numbers. And then the actual people who live there, it's almost like 80% of the people that now live in downtown didn't live there 10 years ago.
Well, I think by their very nature, and there's been a lot of long-term residents. If you look at the Arts District, and you go on the other side of Alameda, the original lofts, the first lofts, the artists and residence lofts, those folks have been there, some of them over 30 years. And that was the first, loft or adaptive reuse pioneer experience in downtown. But I think by their very nature, people who choose to live in the city in a non-suburban kind of approach or format, they have a different mindset.
When you think about, you're running for mayor. There are other individuals that are running for mayor. We've talked to some of them. What differentiates you from the other candidates? What's like the main thing when you think about, I am different from them?
When we talk about just human characteristics, I think that I'm a fighter.
Yeah, but I think everyone will say they're a fighter.
No. I think that if you look back at my record, just as recently as a few weeks ago, I will fight beyond the pale. I don't like to leave people behind, and I will do it on the record. I do it in a way that is very active, and I am very engaged with the people I represent in a very passionate way, a very personal way, because I get very angry when I think that there is a community that is being left behind and there is a way to solve that issue and it's right in front of us and we don't take that opportunity, that I push the envelope. And I will always push the envelope.
So let me give you two things that I think differentiate you. One, you're only one of two women, and you would be the first woman mayor of LA if you were to win. And number two, you're African American. You wouldn't be the first African American. We always think about the great.
Let me further differentiate it for you. I'm an African American Jewish woman who speaks Spanish, and I learned to speak Spanish back in Ohio when I was 15 years old. I don't know if that's something you knew about me.
No.
But,
I knew that you were from Ohio. I knew you spoke Spanish, but I didn't know you were 15 when you first learned.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's been a while, trust me. But I still study Spanish to this day, because language fascinates me. And, when I was in Ohio...
No, you didn't grow up Jewish.
No, I chose to become Jewish. Yeah, when I was...
You converted.
Yes, I did. When I was in Ohio, you could imagine, because I graduated in '73 from high school, there weren't a lot of people to talk to. And so when I came to Los Angeles, to me, this place was heaven for me in terms of languages. so that I could speak to somebody every single day in Spanish. And it was great. I actually came out here to go to a Rose Bowl game with the Ohio State Alumni Association, and it was January the 1st, and the sky was blue, and that was just really all it took, because I was tired of suffering in the cold.
So, in terms of policy, what differentiates you between, for instance, I think everybody is going to be in favor of LA Live and AEG, but you were really the #1 driver on the LA City Council. Although we did have Kevin James here, who says he's completely against football I think he's trying to differentiate himself from that perspective. But in terms of broad policies facing the city of LA, what's one where you or one other candidates really stick out in one direction and the other 3 or 4 are in another situation?
I think on the issue of homelessness, I have differentiated myself in an extremely well-articulated way. I produce deliverables that people can see, they can live in, they can touch. I used, excuse me, my voice is giving out on me.
So if you get everybody who's African American to vote for you, everybody who's Jewish, everybody who's a woman, you're like, it's a slam dunk.
Nothing's a slam dunk because people are apathetic. Did you want me to go back to that first
Yes,
question?
go ahead.
Okay, I'm okay
I was
now.
just trying to fill time while you were taking a drink.
You were good. I like that. It was good. So the question was, how do I differentiate myself?
In terms of policy.
Oh, policy. I think that...
Here, I'm making a distinction between descriptive differentiation, meaning you're a woman, African American, Jewish, your age, where you live, et cetera. That kind of describes you in a sense, and every candidate is going to be living in a different area, basically.
Right.
But in terms of substantive differentiation, meaning what substantive policy areas are you different than the other candidates?
Until I was elected, the city had practiced a policy of containment for people who were homeless, and we got sued and we had to negotiate a settlement. I didn't believe in containing homeless people within a given area as if that would be the solution to the problem of homelessness, and so I pushed the envelope on making sure that we got more money into something called an Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I started the largest homeless shelter in the city as a way of pulling people in off the street and using that as a first stage to be able to put people into a recovery process. And then I delivered. I not only talked about homelessness, which a lot of people talk about homelessness and what they would do to solve it, I actually prepared housing so that we had housing with services on site, psychiatric services, recovery services, family reunification, job placement, so that every single project that I've built has something additional on site for the client base so that they have something to hang on to so that their lives can become stable and we can reduce the number of people who then slide back out into the street. And so I think what differentiates me is I can clearly articulate a policy position and fight it, fund it, defend it, and implement it, and make sure that at the end of the day there is some deliverable there for the people who need it.
And when you think about the strategy, the campaign strategy, what are I think homelessness is an incredibly important issue, especially here at LMU in terms of a social justice issue. And I think there's a lot of advocates and people who will be mobilized by that, but frankly, not many. And so when you strategically start thinking about that campaign, what are going to be the things that define your campaign in terms of your motto or this is why you should vote for me? And our attention span isn't that great. So in 10 seconds, why should I vote for you type of a thing?
Well, because I brought jobs to this city and I've been able to put people back to work and they've been able to get up off their knees and take care of their families and pay their bills and keep their homes over the last 10 years. Because of the work that I have done, I've been able to bring 90,000 jobs back into the city of Los Angeles. And these are net new jobs. Some of them have been construction jobs and some of them have been permanent jobs, but they've been jobs that put people back to work. And I tell the story about a young man, and his name is Jarrell, and we work with him in the southern part of the district through a nonprofit that helps at-risk youth. And our goal is to get these kids through this process so that they can get wraparound services, they get an education, they get stable housing, and they learn how to work and how to recover. And my great joy is when I was at LA Live one night and I was up at the opening of Pool Deck, I think, and this voice says, "Hello, Miss Perry," to me, and is very well dressed in a uniform. And I looked up, and it was Darrell. And I started to cry because I was overjoyed that this is what I work for. This is what I hope for, and that I can actually see it happen. It's the kind of fulfillment that most people never get in the jobs that they have. And every time I go to any one of these projects, people will stop me, and sometimes they call me Jane, or they call me that woman, and say, "Hey, that woman." They say, "Look at me, I got a job." That is, I think, what differentiates me, because it shows to me that the strategy that I've employed to create that relationship with these for-profit projects, with these nonprofit job readiness organizations that reach deep into people's communities and pull people out who need to be pulled, and to train and whatever and get them ready, and then at the end of the day, they actually get a job. That's the whole point.
Is it an advantage or disadvantage to you that you come from the 9th District and are running for mayor, as opposed to one of your opponents comes from like the Silver Lake area, another one from the Valley, et cetera? Is that how do you play that off in terms of the political campaign strategy?
To me, my district, the district I represent, is...
Which has the least or the second fewest number of voters in the city.
To me, it's an opportunity to say, look at what I've done, because...
If I could do it in the 9th, I can do it in the whole
Well,
city.
there was only one direction for the district to go, and that was up.
Mm-hmm. Is it an advantage for you or a disadvantage that you're a female candidate running for mayor?
That's an interesting question.
Come on, you've thought about that
No,
before.
I have thought about it, because it's interesting, because I watch people's reactions. I go all over the place, and I think that in the way I present myself is still very Midwestern. And, when I go into other...
I never think of you as being Midwestern.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I do,
Yeah.
sort of. I still do, sort of. Yeah, kind of corny. Yeah.
Well, that is true.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But, and more direct.
Okay, so...
Very direct.
You have been on the council for 11 years, will be for 13 years.
Yes.
At one point during your tenure, I believe, about a third of the council was female.
Yes.
You replaced a woman.
Yes.
Since then, you've had people like Jackie Goldberg, Cindy Misikowski, I think Ruth Galanter, who's in the audience right now.
Galanter, if you prefer.
Wendy Gruhl, who's also running for mayor. Why is there only one woman in the LA City Council? And when you leave, there may be none.
Well, I think women and men wield power very differently.
Give me a concrete example.
Well,
especially
I think
your
oftentimes men try to vanquish their foes. And sometimes men don't examine the consequences of their actions and how they translate out into a community. And they get a little bit too engaged in the process of winning and losing, as opposed to what did you leave behind? And what did you do for the people who are affected by this? So women sometimes, they're maybe too process oriented, and they want to make sure people will support them, and they're not sure they can raise money, and they're not socialized to just get out there and go like 1, 2, 3, punch you in the face, And in politics, you've got to have a little blend of both. I work hard for my folks that I represent, and I want to build things. I want to develop things. But if I have to punch somebody in the face to win, in the end, I'll probably do that. I might talk to you about it first.
That's not very ladylike.
No, I know it's not. But it's not ladylike. But you see, this politics. It's changed. It's become much more polarized, much more combative, and with term limits.
And so you think because it's more polarized and combative, it's less conducive for women winning elections?
Well, I think a lot of women don't want to be bothered. I've talked to a number of women for the last 2 years and offered to mentor and to share information. And I had one taker, and I'm hoping she'll be able to pull herself along, but I don't.
So you're specifically talking about trying to recruit and mentor someone to run for your current council district.
Absolutely.
And
I have done that, and I'm still receptive to it, but, you know, the time is running short.
Right.
And, you know, I have to run for mayor.
And you purposely have outreach to female candidates as
Absolutely.
opposed to male candidates.
Well, you know, it's funny, and nothing against the guys here, but, you know, it's funny, a guy will wake up one morning and say, you know, I think I'm going to run for the United States Senate, you know, and they don't even think twice about it, whereas women will, you know, need a group and do white papers on it and, you know, make sure that we can have a, you know, be supportive and all that. It's just a different way, I think, that we have been socialized in our society, where women sometimes question themselves. And
okay, so we started this process in terms of this question by asking, is it an advantage or disadvantage for you being a female candidate for mayor? Advantage or disadvantage?
I think it's an advantage.
And then we talked about your district being an advantage or disadvantage, and you thought an advantage. How about the fact that you've been in government as an elected official for 12 years and a previous other 10 years, that you've been in government for over 20 some odd years? Is that an advantage or disadvantage for you being a mayoral candidate?
Well, you don't know this about me, but I was in the private sector for 14 years before that, and I worked in law firms. I was a paralegal, so I'm a hybrid. And so I have both sides of the coin. I understand what it means to be in the private sector and the public sector. I think what I do have is an understanding of the legislative process, and that I have a firm grasp of how you create a delivery system to get to the end goal of what it is your policies you want to implement, or what your objectives are in terms of providing for the people you represent. And to be able to marry that with my experience in the private sector, I think is quite an advantage.
So, but you know people will come after you and a couple of the other candidates. You've been in office too long. You're part of the problem because you've been part of government. And then the response is always, well, we have experience and we can get things done. And then you go down and you prove the record. So at the end of the day, you think, though, being in government that long is an advantage in terms of being a mayoral candidate?
I don't, you know, it's not the length of time, it's what you did while you were there, and what do you have to show for it. And, you know, you could be in government for 5 years or 30 years. If you have nothing to show for it, then, you know, what good did you do?
How about African American? Advantage or disadvantage running for mayor of LA?
I think it's part of the mix. I think it's an interesting mix. This city is a very interesting mix. It's about to transform itself again. My experiences over the last few months in working very closely with the Korean American community and understanding our commonalities and issues that we share has been, for me, very energizing. And I think it has challenged some old stereotypes and maybe will cause people to throw out the old script and start a new script. So to me, it's exciting. It helps me grow as a person, but I think for people who observe me, and no matter what it is they see that there's maybe another pathway that can be created, and new relationships to be forged.
You being associated so much with, as a supporter of AEG, football stadium, Staples Center, LA Live, the convention center and all that, an advantage or disadvantage for mayor of LA?
I think it's an advantage. It shows that I want to grow. It shows that I want to bring jobs here and put people back to work. I'm just nervous about the football team. I don't know who it is yet, but I hope it's not the Raiders.
There's a lot of Raider fans out there.
I know.
Raider Nation.
I know, it's Raider Nation.
There's
Raider
a lot.
fans.
There's
Raider
a lot of
fans.
votes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. You know. So yeah.
So
we'll
you're
see.
obviously you're in favor of NFL football.
Oh, absolutely. And two teams. I hope we can get 2 teams. I think it will not only bring an enormous amount of revenue that we desperately need to, you know, pave the streets and fix the sidewalks and the potholes, but if you think about the fact that the construction alone will put nearly 20,000 people to work, and then there will be, I think the figure was over 6,000 permanent jobs, and then all the collateral jobs that it will develop and attract, how do you think you build a future? This is the way to build it.
Well, AEG, the Anschutz Entertainment Group, just released the draft EIR, I believe, or EIR.
I think it's coming out in about a week.
But it's 10,000 pages long. Okay, and it took a special act, not of God, but of the state legislature, to reduce this environmental impact in terms of time. Obviously, you're in favor of that?
Well, that was the state legislature, and then this is a once-in-a-lifetime project and probably a one-of-a-kind project. Maybe there may occur in the state some other, but I think what their concern was at the state level is that they didn't want opposing parties to use CEQA to stop the project,
right.
And so it enabled the project to move forward, not compromise the ability to review the environmental issues, but enabled the project to move forward and to protect the process from frivolous lawsuits.
I am a big supporter of AEG, the football stadium. I live 2 blocks away. I'm completely biased.
Traffic, okay.
But so my question really is, the opponents, what's the biggest criticism of the football stadium? What concerns you the most about not it getting built, but once it's built? What's the greatest concern that you have?
The greatest concern that I have is that we have to absolutely be on target on traffic management, traffic congestion management, and we really, this is our one chance to link this project to public transportation and to get it right so that we can really and truly encourage people to get out of their cars. And then, hopefully by the time that construction is done, the second phase of the exposition line will be done, and people will come west and go east and actually take the exposition line, get off on 11th Street. AEG is going to help us build out that platform there so that it can accommodate more people, and that it's a nice walk, a good walk, an entertaining walk from Flower over to the main campus, and that we have enough hotel rooms to accommodate more tourists, and that the convention center is done.
It's a concern for you that we won't have enough hotels? Because right now we don't have enough
Well,
hotel
my concern
rooms,
is traffic, and that we get it right,
Okay.
and that we build in a way that is not reactionary, but to be anticipatory. So we have to build ahead of where we are. We have to build to plan for more people than we can even imagine. We're talking about 72,000 seats. In addition to, when you have all those venues activated now, that's 40,000 people in 4 square blocks. So you do 40,000 plus 72,000 more, plus hotels, et cetera, et cetera. So we really have to get this traffic issue and the interface, the intermodal connections, the light rail, and to promote that so that people take it and once and for all get out of their cars.
We had Supervisor Sevieroslavsky here a couple of weeks ago, and I asked him the question, what vote or decision do you regret the most? And I'm going to ask you the same question, but his answer was voting to expand the convention center. Not because he thought it was a bad idea in terms of the convention center and all that, but that everything that was promised didn't come through, meaning the building of the hotels and all that. And he recognizes that immediately after it was built, we went into another mini recession, not like the one today, but before, in a real estate downturn. But if he wishes he could take anything back, it would be that he hadn't supported and the convention center hadn't expanded at that time. Do you what about the convention center? I mean, what does building NFL football right next to the convention center do to that, what many people have described as a white elephant?
Well, that was a long time ago, and the market has changed a lot, and people are looking at Los Angeles now as it's a Pacific Rim city. We are supposedly a major international city. This is an incredible media market. Even in the recession, it still held firm. I don't see it as a white elephant. It was then, but it has begun to recover in large part because LA Live and Staples got built, and it did bring more people and more tourism and more conventions to downtown Los Angeles. So in a sense, the convention center benefited from the growth of LA Live. And then as we surge ahead, and obviously you have to have checks and balances in that, we still keep control of our property on which the stadium will be built, so we have not gotten rid of that asset. We still maintain that control. You have to do it in a way that's measured and very able to demonstrate to the taxpayers that this is a wise investment. and that your taxpayer interest will be protected. And that may be the difference between then and now, because there are inherent protections, and the risk is we keep our underlying asset, the land, we share the revenue, we will float the bonds to finance the construction of the new convention center, but they will build it for us and then convey it back to us, so we'll get it done quickly. So I think we've learned a lot as a city on how to do that public-private partnership much more effectively than we might have known 30 years ago.
What does Jan Perry, the public Jan Perry, not the private Jan Perry, the public Jan Perry regret most about a vote or a decision that you've taken in the 11 years that you've been on the city council? That if you could have the vote back, or if it could turn out differently, that you say, God, I wish I had never voted for that, or I wish I had known that that was going to happen and been able to change that?
I think the thing that's so frustrating when you have to vote, especially on complex things like power rates or water rates, and you hope for the best information that you can possibly get. I mean, I think back about, 2-3 years ago, and that big fight with the Department of Water and Power on the power revenue transfer that we relied on to balance our budget, and they withheld, and we almost our bond rating dropped.
Yeah.
And if I had to go back and do that over again, I think I would have pounded even harder to try to force more information out on the record and on the table. Now we have a ratepayer advocate, and hopefully that'll change the culture of how we get our information. But to fight for more information and to force more information out into the open, I think that's my greatest regret. I wish I had done more.
But for many years, the Department of Water and Power has given the city money, theoretically excess money,
right.
But surplus money.
Right.
And so it became really political for just that last couple of times. But you're in favor of DWP continuing that transfer.
Yeah, I am. But now the voters have changed the process, which is a good thing, because they have to declare their surplus within a time frame, and then if they're not going to convey their surplus, or they have to define the surplus, tell it what it is, and certain time frames starting in the fall of each year, and whether or not they intend to convey it over to the city to assist the city in balancing its budget. And so now we'll know on the record there won't be at least theoretically, won't be any more power plays where you play chicken all night long and say, well, we're not going to give you this money, let your bond rating drop, and you go into default. Supposedly, now with this new process, that won't happen.
So I'd like to change gears a little bit and talk about the LA Police Department. Are they doing an excellent, good, poor, or very poor job in your estimation?
Well, I work in an area that has a lot of different divisions in it that have high crime rates, and I have seen only positive growth and evolution of the relationships that LAPD has with the people who live in the areas like 77th and Southeast, Southwest, Central Division, Newton Division. And I don't know if these names mean anything to the students, but these are all areas within South Los Angeles, with the exception of Central Division, which is downtown, but then they have the highest concentration of homeless people in the city, so they have a very difficult service. So for me, working closely with the community police advisory boards and various neighborhood watch groups, and to watch the relationships and how they have so improved over the years. One of the highlights each year for me is to go to the big Halloween party down in 77th Division.
And what do you usually dress as?
I go as a politician. No, I don't know. No, I just go. I mean, I actually go in the haunted house because the kids do it, the explorers do it. And
what are you most afraid of in the haunted house?
Them. Okay. Yeah, no, I usually come out of there and I can't even speak for about 10 minutes afterwards. It's so traumatic. But they love that. To see thousands of kids, teenagers, come to the police station for a good time. They have holiday parties and that sort of thing. It's changed a lot. It's changed for the better.
So the next mayor of Los Angeles will have the opportunity to reappoint the current police chief, Charlie Beck. He serves for 5 years, then can be reappointed for another 5 years. From what you know right now, as mayor of LA, would you reappoint Charlie Beck?
Yeah, I like Charlie. I've worked with Charlie a lot. I worked with Charlie in robbery homicide. Charlie worked in Central. He was the captain, I believe, in Central, and he was the head of South Bureau, and he is common sense, no nonsense. He's direct, he's accessible, he has relationships with people, and he's a good listener. He's a very, very good listener, and I have experienced that firsthand.
Recently, a LAPD for the first time indicted one of their own police officers for racial profiling.
Saw that in the paper.
Yeah, and basically this is a motorcycle police officer out in the San Fernando Valley who was disproportionately, purposely going out and giving traffic tickets to Latinos. And it's hard to believe that this is the first time that the department was able to catch somebody doing that. And it's hard to believe that this has only been going on right now, not in the past. What is the council, or how can the council respond to this, or the relationship between the city council and the police department is always a difficult one. It's always good politics to be supportive of public safety, yet you want them to be responsive, you want them to regulate themselves. What can the council do to help the police department be the best it can be in terms of internal review, internal affairs, internal regulations?
You can be very keyed in to what people are saying in your community and really listen to them. Because if you spend a lot of time out in anyone's community, various communities, you're going to hear things, and you may hear complaints, and you will see a pattern that begins to emerge. And it may be a pattern that is unique to a particular ethnic group or to a particular age group, but you're going to hear about it, and then you need to reflect that in some legislative action, or to communicate with your command staff and your senior lead officers in the area that you represent, and to say, I see there's a problem here, I'm hearing there's a problem here. Because you're right, I'm sure that this fellow who was in the paper today, that's not the first time that discussion was ever had. But this one obviously manifested itself in a very substantive way. In the area I represent, and I share this on a regular basis, and people feel that they're being unfairly targeted in what do you call them, traffic stops, and they feel that they're being targeted, and we just went through that controversy with the police commission, people's cars being confiscated and they couldn't get to work, and that's very traumatic, not only to the person who loses the car, but to the entire family, because you can't conduct your family business.
And that's the second thing I want to really talk to you about. On the one hand, I think symbolically what happened this week with the police department going after this one individual is that systematically the police department is saying, and symbolically, we're not going to tolerate that anymore. And before there used to be this code of silence, and even the upper command would like, hey, let's just not tell anybody, let's try to take care of it internally. That definitely the LAPD has changed, and they're changing in terms of how they view their interaction with the community. What really bothers me are some systematic that I think the council can change, and is exactly this, and that is that the policy for LAPD is if you stop a driver and they either don't have a license or what have you, that they can confiscate that car. And that car then goes to be impounded for over 30 days. And we know that disproportionately that impacts Latinos, specifically undocumented Latinos, who by definition can't have a license, yet they are part of our city, a contributing part of the city in many respects, especially in your district. And yet, and I feel that the police department is part of this, to some extent no fault of their own, because they have to in terms of the way the law is written. But we're really empowering people to tow truck companies to make a lot of money on the back of individual LA residents. And why can't the city council change that? I mean, Charlie Beck has purposely gone out there and tried to do that. But I didn't get the sense that the council jumped on this and said, okay, we're going to support you, and we're going to go against the police protective.
Well, here's a teachable moment. That policy came up through the police commission, and Charlie answers to the police commission first. And from a legislative process, first you have the commission in that case, and then unless a council person seeks to review the decision of a commission like the police commission, then that issue does not come before the city council. But Charlie made a good and practical policy decision that I think goes to the benefit of everyone's communities, and it was very balanced and very well reasoned. But there was nobody, and myself included, in the city council who sought to bring that in what we call it as a Proposition 245, and it's like an appellate review of
That's in the city charter, the city's constitution,
yes.
Which says you have the right to review
the decision of a commission. So since it was, well, what I consider to be a very well-reasoned approach to a problem across the city, there was no reason to bring it in and try to overturn it or to tamper with it, basically.
So I'm going to ask you a series of questions about some initiatives that are going to be on the ballot, and then about a couple of individuals. Then I want to talk about redistricting, and then a couple of other issues. Then we'll watch a video as well.
Hopefully we're queued up by then.
Yeah. In this upcoming November election, Governor Brown is proceeding with an initiative that would increase the tax rate of the wealthy. Are you in favor of that? Are you going to vote for it?
I would probably vote for it. I don't know that it'll pass. I read something in the paper the other day that I think it was in the 60th percentile at this point.
Which is pretty good, even though it needs 67%.
Yeah, that's a large margin for error there, and so we'll see.
Also this November, the LA County voters may be asked to pass or extend Measure R, which is a sales tax that goes to transportation projects. It's not in addition to, but it's just extending the years.
Yes.
Are you in favor of that?
I have to look at the unintended consequences. I think on its face, I would say that I was in favor. I am in favor of it, but I think you have to really examine what that does to the future of our transportation funds and how we leverage against that, and whether we compromise, our own short-term need for a long-term possible gain that none of us may be around to see, or ensure that it actually happens.
Again, in the November election, LA Unified is proposing an initiative that would call for an additional, and the numbers vary, $270, $300 a year parcel tax that would be added for every single homeowner to pay for operations of LAUSD, not construction, but operations.
Yeah.
Are you in favor of that?
No, I'm not in favor of that. I think that...
but we need money for our kids.
Yeah, we do, and that's true. And, I think about things like Los Angeles County is sitting on $800 million in the First Five program, the tobacco tax initiative, which is targeted for children ages 0 through 5, and early health education, health intervention, things like that, where we could be creative and to look at sources of money like that to help augment what we need in the schools. I think you have to be able to show people, especially property owners, that you've done every possible thing that you can do to mitigate a situation before you go and ask them to pay a higher parcel tax. And when you have a state where a large percentage of people are still barely hanging on to their homes, they won't be able to absorb the impact of that. They won't be able to pay it.
How about an initiative? There's a proposal for a statewide bond measure of $11 billion to overhaul the state's water system.
I haven't read the fiscal impacts of that, so I can't tell you whether I would support it, but what I would say is this. Unless you can convince people in a very specific way how it would benefit them and help them improve the quality of their life, it's probably very difficult to get something like that passed.
Yeah. Currently, right now, they're circulating signatures for an initiative that they're calling COPA, which stands for the California Opportunity and Prosperity Act. And let me read you part of it, which would decriminalize foreign workers without papers if they pay state taxes, know or are learning English, do not have felony convictions or are suspected terrorists, are not a public charge, and have lived in California since before January 1st, 2008. It's supposed to lead to $325 million a year for the state. And it really, it's kind of, I call it like an adult DREAM Act type of thing.
Yeah.
Would you vote for that?
First, I have to look and see who supports it, who's against it.
I'm for it.
Okay, that's great. Well, there you go. Wow. Okay. And then a lot of people pay taxes now. And a lot of people who are undocumented already pay taxes, and they are a part of the system. And so I need to see the methodology behind it to see if that's actually true, if there's no fiscal impact in terms of, other than formalizing a process, creating a framework so that we might encourage more people to be able to come out of the shadows and, step into the light, and to know that, the money that they spend paying taxes and paying into the system and participating in the system, I think is a positive step forward.
We are at LMU, Loyola Marymount University, having a conversation with Councilwoman Jan Perry, candidate for mayor. And because we are at a university, we're going to give her the opportunity to use the traditional academic grade scale and see if she's willing to give the following leaders a grade: A, B, C, D, or F.
And so we don't have can you do pluses and minuses?
You're the instructor. You can do anything you want.
0.5.
It's
Okay.
like I whatever,
Well,
however
see,
I want to grade my students, I
When
do
we were
that.
growing up, we didn't have anything above a 4.0. Now they have 4.25 and
That's
all
because
that.
you didn't go to Loyola Marymount.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I get it.
Everybody
All right,
here is above a 4.0.
Okay, see that? Okay, all right. Okay. I didn't even say fight on once.
Well,
Okay?
yeah.
Do you feel me?
LMU basketball was in the playoffs. USC,
Okay, well,
I think
no one
they-
ever said
they
we could play
won
basketball.
one game, I think,
No,
in the whole league.
whatever.
Okay. A, B, C, D, F. Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. What grade would you give him?
I give him a good B.
A
B
good
plus.
B. A B plus? Why? What would it take for him to get an A? Can he do extra credit?
Stay home.
Okay. Governor Jerry Brown.
You know what? I like an A minus.
Oh,
You know why?
Higher than the mayor?
Well, you know why? He has something the mayor doesn't. He's got age, and he doesn't really have to please too many people. And he appears to relish that position. Yeah.
President Barack Obama.
I would give him an A minus.
Okay.
He's grown a lot.
Yeah, he's gotten gray.
Yeah, he's gotten gray, but he's also he's become much more definitive, which I like, because I think that's what people need in a president.
LAPD Chief of Police Charlie Beck.
Give him a B plus.
LA County Sheriff Lee Baca.
Lee is an interesting guy. He is very unique.
I say that about a lot of my
No.
students.
To me, he's a law enforcement person, but to me, he's like a shaman too. You know, he is a thought leader. I would give him an A.
All right. LAUSD Superintendent John Daisy.
I don't know Daisy very well, but so far he's thrown himself full throttle, and he's had to make some really horrible decisions and deal with some really horrible situations. And I think I'd give him an A.
The LA City Council as a whole.
That's not a fair question to ask. You know, I'm still in a dark place on that.
That sounds like an F.
No, you know what? I'm trying to put this whole experience over the last couple of months in perspective, and do an average on it. There are some bright spots there, but not a lot.
Okay. A, B, C.
I'd say C.
Okay. CAO Miguel Santana.
Oh, I love Miguel. You know why? He's really smart, and he says it like it is. I'd give him an A.
City Attorney Carmen Trutanich.
Carmen and I are friends now.
Okay.
I don't know.
Come on, you give
A lot of
everybody
plus,
else.
lot of. Let's see. Well, you got to give him. a good grade because he likes to get out there and punch it out.
Okay, of all the people we've had, you're like the easiest grader so far.
I know. I got to give somebody an F somewhere, right?
Okay. Herb Wesson.
I don't have a comment on that.
All right. So you're talking about the LA City Council and the tough time that you've having. We're basically talking about redistricting.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, let's go there.
Let's go there.
Let's go there.
Every 10 years, we have to redistrict. Okay. You were president pro tem of the city council. Eric Garcetti is president of the city council. You're in the number 2 position. Okay.
Yeah, it was Joe Biden.
Yeah, you're Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Okay. The redistricting has to happen. It's inherently a political situation. When people talk to me about this, I say, I'm not surprised by what happened. I may be surprised about a particular district here or there, but that someone was going to lose and someone was going to win. I mean, at least they didn't put you in the valley like they did to Ruth Galander.
Yeah, I know that, but I don't buy that. It's not inherently a political process. It is a process that is supposed to be governed by the Voting Rights Act.
Okay.
So there's a lack of respect and a lack of willingness to be honest and forthright.
Okay, but let me push you on the Voting Rights Act.
Please do.
There's still going to be 3 black districts, 4 Latino districts. I mean, you know,
Well, what you have to do as part of the Voting Rights Act, you develop districts that are contiguous, that are compact. You are supposed to consider public testimony. And if you create districts or move people around based on race or ethnicity, you are supposed to conduct something called a racially polarized voting study. That was not done in this case. There was absolute disregard for that requirement and just wholesale moving of Latinos out of the 14th district. So you take a safe seat, that was the 14th district, that had a 57% citizen voting age population of Latinos, and took it down to now just hovering over 50% just to take downtown. The moving around of African American voters from my district and Mr. Park's district into Mr. Wesson's district, so you could separate economic engines from populations. So you might have 3 safe black seats, but you have 2 seats that have nothing in them, except people who are poverty-stricken. So what did you achieve, other than to draw a seat for one of your friends?
But you and Councilman Parks were punished for not being team players, not voting for Herb Wesson as president, and right as this is going on, redistricting happens, and so the winner, meaning President Wesson, has to give to his supporters some things, Jose Huizar, and take from those who didn't support him some things, meaning Jan Perry. So he took downtown away from the 9th and gave it to the 14th because Jose Huizar voted for him and you did not.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And they did it.
But that's politics.
But that's wrong. I'm not saying it's not politics, but it's wrong. There's no regard
But
there.
there's no criteria for
Yes,
that
there
type
is
of...
criteria. The criteria is the Voting Rights Act. They ignored it. That's my point is they ignored.
So what are you guys going to do about it?
Well, we're shopping it around now, and I'm not going to tell you all my secrets, but we'll see if there's anybody out there who's listening, anybody out there who wants to pursue the legal course once the mayor either vetoes the map, or signs the map, or lets the time run out, and then they become
What do you think
adopted.
What do you think he's going to do? What's the mayor going to do?
Well, I actually talked to him, and I asked him if he would consider vetoing the map.
And?
I don't think at the day that I spoke to him, he was willing to do that. Now, who knows if pressure continues and people continue to talk to him, and other communities are talking to him and asking him to veto the map, particularly in the Korean American community, because they really, truly wanted to be consolidated in one district and move into Eric Garcetti's council district.
Yeah.
So, yes, of course, I understood the consequences of my action by not going in and voting for Mr. Wesson. And
Why didn't you vote for him?
well, we had a
He was
different,
the only candidate.
we had difference of opinion. I don't always jump on the train just to jump on the train. I had some questions that I asked him before that day that people voted, and I don't think he appreciated the questions that I asked, and I think he thought that they were ill-conceived questions.
In public, you asked him?
No,
these
I asked him
questions?
in private.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were they?
Oh, they were private.
Oh, okay.
You don't get to have that. But he didn't like the fact that I asked them, and I asked them anyway, and we couldn't come to an understanding, and instead of raining on his parade, I sat it out, because I knew he was going to get elected anyway. And I also knew, and I understood, that whatever committees I sat on at that time would be taken from me. What I did not expect is that 13 of my colleagues would vote to punish the people who actually, are going to suffer the consequences of their actions. And that's what upsets me more than anything.
So there was a 13-2 vote. You were in the minority for who was going to become president. There was a 13-2 vote in terms of who was going to get what committees. Mm-hmm. There was a 13-2 vote in terms of how the districts were going to be drawn out. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty clear in terms of you and the other person in terms of the two is Councilmember Parks, mm-hmm. that the two of you have a very different opinion or coalition in terms of the rest of the council. Mm-hmm. Has that manifested itself in other policy arenas?
Well, I did put in a number of motions on framework for conducting hearings during redistricting, and I did put in a motion to ask that commissioners be required to disclose all of their external communications, because there was a lot of activity early on where people were basically phoning in what kind of a map they wanted, from the outside. One of my appointee got a call from an assemblyman who's running for office who said, "Look, I really want you to move USC over into the 9th." I thought that was ridiculous. So I put in these motions so that we could discuss them in a timely way before the final vote was taken.
Let me guess, they lost 13-2.
No. Well, I'll tell you a funny story, but no, they did the Sacramento playbook, which is send them to committee where they die there. Oh. So, except in one case, the last motion I did on how we connect the hearings, and that came up to council, and they wanted to send it to committee, and I said, no, I want you to vote it up and down here. Just do it right here, right now, today, in front of everyone, on the record, so people can see. And some of them one individual in particular got very angry with me, and I just wanted them to put it on the record. So
all this politics that is revolved around this, do you think it plays or it resonates in terms of the mayor's race? Does it impact the mayor's race, positive or negative?
I think it has awakened a lot of people across the city. There's a lot of people are talking about it now because it opened up or maybe pulled back a curtain on the political process and how awful it can be. Mm-hmm. As to whether or not it resonates in the mayor's race, I think it'll boil down to elements like, did you stand up for people or did you vote against their interests? And I think that's what people will remember more than anything. I don't know that they're going to, want to talk about the, citizen voting age
right.
population and all the technical aspects of that. Probably not. They're just going to say, well, why did you try to take the airport out of Bill Rosenthal's district and then put it back? The airport, we live near the airport, it affects us. Or, why did you take that economic engine away and put it in the 14th where they already had Mount Washington and Eagle Rock and Glassell Park and really nice areas. And now we don't have any middle class areas attached to our community. So that's what I think people may remember.
So in 10 years from now, we're going to have to go through redistricting again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have kind of three models. One, let the council do it themselves. Mm-hmm. Two, have a totally independent commission like the state has. Mm-hmm. Or three, which is I think is the worst combination.
That was the worst.
Have a commission set up
yes.
that then doesn't really have the power, but then makes a recommendation to the council.
They were taking, with the exception of a very few commissioners, and I have to name them, Bobby Jean Anderson, David Roberts, and Helen Kim. And I didn't know Helen before, but she's a standalone, righteous person. They were taking orders.
Okay. We are at Loyola Marymount University with Councilwoman Jan Perry running for mayor in 2013.
me siento, como dicen, orgullosa de ser una ranchera de la 111 y Stanford.
Mi nombre es Luis Gamboa.
Rosario, hola.
Mi nombre es Jesús Moreno.
Mi nombre es Irma Gamboa.
Mi nombre es Pedro Barrera, yo soy el encargado de alcance comunitario del jardín de Stanford Avalon.
Yo vivo aquí desde el año 85. Yo vi cómo era esto antes. Era un lugar muy feo, que daba miedo. Yo caminaba por estas calles, pero no eran seguras. Estos eran lugares peligrosos. Desde que esto empezó, el proyecto de estos jardines para esta ciudad, fue como un paisaje que le dio color, le dio vida, le dio alegría a todos los de aquí.
Pero originalmente casi un 70% somos de los que éramos originalmente jardineros en la Alameda y 41. Fue cuando empezamos este lugar que, claro, éramos pocos porque no creían en este lugar, pero cuando nos apoyamos unos con los otros, empezamos a llamarnos unos a otros y estamos bien a gusto.
Era un miembro del jardín de la 41, donde fuimos desalojados por los activistas que prometieron ayudarnos allá. Y pues en realidad lo que prometieron no era nada más cosas para tener ellos grupo apoyo, para ellos ser los dueños de allá 41. Y nos fueron corriendo de a uno por uno, nos fueron sacando.
Y uno de los motivos que estamos aquí es porque está muy fresco y nos ponemos a recordar cosas que vivimos y que ahora gozamos gracias a la ayuda de la concejal y del alcalde Antonio Villarraigosa y la concejal Jean Perry. Pero al mismo tiempo nos recuerda malos momentos que vivimos en la 41 y la Alameda. La razón es porque nosotros fuimos unos de las personas que lo iniciamos para venir a ser pisoteados con nuestra propia cultura por personas que no sin escrúpulos, porque nosotros fuimos desalojados de la Alameda y 41, no por el alcalde, no por la concejal, no por el dueño del terreno, ni la ciudad, sino por nuestros propios líderes que nosotros confiamos en ellos.
Y pues nosotros buscamos otras alternativas, encontramos este jardín donde nos ubicamos con la ayuda del actual alcalde Antonio Villarraigosa y la maravillosa ayuda de la concejal Jean Perry.
Yo me recuerdo que mi cuñado, que es Juan Gamboa, y otro señor Margarito, vinieron y miraron este lugar, en el cual recuerdo que dieron una contestación que Rufina Juárez estaba negando a aceptar este lugar porque no miró que era conveniente, pero aquí podíamos ver cabido, pues digamos que un 80, un 90% que estábamos allá, en el cual tengo entendido que ella lo rechazó, pero no sé cómo se dieron cuenta mi cuñado y esta otra persona que es Margarito, vinieron al lugar, nos dimos cuenta, wow, es una cosa que podemos darle uso. Tuvimos una junta en enero 8, que no se me olvida ese día, que fue una junta que aquí estuvimos, nos convenimos, sí, vamos a aceptar.
Y pues de aquí sembramos para comer y un poco para vender y así aquí sacar un peso.
Cultivando cosas que mucha gente las viene, las toma y con mucho gusto, con mucha alegría, se llevan cosas a la mesa frescas como lo tienen todos los compañeros también.
Y la razón no es que nos sentamos aquí a ver pasar la gente, no. Nosotros somos gente de trabajo, Somos gente que el jabón lo hacemos de la tierra y el agua lo hacemos de los rayos del sol. Porque si ustedes se fijan en las caras de los campesinos originales, son gente humilde que se sacan el taco de la boca para dárselo a la gente. Pero también cuando nos ofenden también guardamos rencores. Y creo que estos proyectos son de mucho beneficio a la ciudad.
Porque las veces que la hemos necesitado, nos ha dado la mano, nunca nos ha dicho que no, nunca nos ha hecho un gesto, decir que no puede. Siempre que nosotros hemos necesitado de ella, siempre nos ha ayudado. Y esa es una manera de manifestarse que en realidad sí nos ha ayudado la concejal. Por eso pienso yo que es una buena persona ella.
Nosotros nos sentimos muy orgullosos de que la concejal sea amigo de nosotros y que ella se considere una campesina, igual que nosotros. ¿Por qué? Porque ella nos lo ha comprobado con hechos de que ella está con nosotros y es de nosotros, porque para ella no hay raza ni color. Para ella nos ayudó porque ella sabe el tipo de proyecto y el beneficio que hacemos a la comunidad.
Sí, hemos ido a reuniones que ella ha tenido, que nos ha invitado. Hemos, como te mencioné, la hemos recibido aquí, que es un orgullo cuando, wow, hay gente que ni me cree cuando me dice, ay, ¿a poco de veras va a venir Jumper? Claro que sí. Ella viene y hasta le hemos hecho una carne asada por ahí, estilo rancho, y a veces sí me da un poquito de pena que digo, wow, una persona importante venir a un lugar y me emociona cuando yo miro que ella hasta trata de hablar español con mi esposo, porque mi esposo habla muy poco inglés, entiende muy poco, pero es una cosa que donde ella nos mira, nos reconoce y es un orgullo que yo siento porque digo, wow, una persona importante que tiene un bonito, que dijera, pues es muy comunicativa y nos reconoce donde andamos, nos reconoce. Más que todo me siento orgullosa porque yo no pensaba que ella nos toma en cuenta y wow, cuando ella nos conoce y me emociona porque digo, oh, ella sabe que estamos haciendo algo bien para la comunidad.
Pero gracias a Dios y gracias a la concejal Jean Perry y al alcalde, estamos reiniciando otro jardín.
Mi trabajo y lo estoy haciendo y estoy muy contento de todo esto aquí.
Todos los compañeros que estamos aquí dentro de este jardín, nos vemos como si fuéramos una familia, nos ayudamos unos a los otros y esto significa mucho para nosotros, ya que nosotros somos unas personas mayores que venimos aquí, nos quitamos el estrés de cosas que nos pasan y que nos han pasado.
Muchísimas gracias y Dios los bendiga y que siga adelante todos estos jardines para tranquilidad de mucha gente, tanto para el ranchero como para el que viene a llevarse las verduras.
Por lo tanto, los invito a que vengan a visitarnos. Las puertas están abiertas para cada persona y si en un futuro la comunidad quiere venir a disfrutar de esta belleza, los invitamos. Gracias.
We are having a conversation with Councilwoman Jan Perry here at Loyola Marymount University. Councilwoman, one of the most controversial issues that has occurred in your district and that you've been involved with is the urban farms. It's a phenomenon that's been across the country in terms of as more people turn to not only having farmer markets, but actually growing their own food. But you hardly see it in a dense area. By the way, from the 2010 census, the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim area is now considered the most dense area, denser than New York in all of the United States. To, in a sense, have a farm in that dense area is very unusual. But it happened because there was some empty property that the city owned. Walk us through
Yeah.
what the issue is, the events, and what the controversy is.
Well, it goes back to a time when Mayor Bradley was still mayor in 1992 riots. There was a parcel of land across from the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank that was empty. He wanted to create a community project, so he asked the food bank to supervise the development of a community garden so people could just go back to the land and do something that was positive.
Property owned by the city at that time.
Well, taken by the city through eminent domain.
But at that point,
At that point, it was in the city's control.
Right.
Yeah. Eventually, the city lost the eminent domain case, and it reverted back to the property owner.
What year was that?
Oh, boy, let's see. It's been probably 5-6 years now.
Right.
But it's 5 years ago.
Right.
So anyway, the city eventually lost the case and had to convey the property back to the property owner, and that was that. So the farmers had to be evicted from the property. Now,
So let me just stop you there to summarize for a second. The city took the property for public use.
and never used it for
Right.
public
At
use.
one point, they were talking about an incinerator, another point about the port.
Housing.
Housing, et cetera, but the city never used it. Under eminent domain law, if the city or the school district or any public entity takes your land and then they don't use it for public use, the previous owner has the right to reclaim it.
It's called the right of first refusal, which is what happened here. You cannot take someone's land and not use it for a public benefit.
Right.
And the city never did.
Right.
So that is ultimately why we lost.
And by the time the property owner took the property back through the court system, because the city wanted to keep the land.
Well, yeah, I don't know if that's so true, but I mean, they were involved in litigation, so they were fighting as you would do in litigation.
How many farmers were there?
I think at its height, according to our count, there were more than 100. Most of them are now down, as you can see from the comments on the video, most of them, 80 or 90 of them are at the new garden.
Okay, so there were about 100 farmers. They
Over
weren't-
100.
Over 100,
Yeah.
but they weren't paying to be there.
Well, they actually were, and this is what I learned. And I learned it from Mr. Gamboa and Mr. Barrera and Mrs. Gamboa. I was sitting in my office one day, and Mr. Barrera came walking in, and at the time his daughter was very young. And so we just sat and talked. He didn't tell me who he was or why he was there. And we talked for a while, and then after we had a nice conversation, he said, I just came from a meeting, and he named the names of the people who were leading the garden at this time, and these are the things that they told me. And I didn't think they were true, but I wanted to come and meet you and see, who you were and what you were all about. And I see that they haven't been telling us the truth.
And what were they saying?
Well, they were taking money from the gardeners, and if you go to the website, they had a PayPal account. So they were surcharging them.
Who was?
Their leadership, the leadership in their own garden organization.
It was kind of like a homeowners association.
Yeah, it was kind of like a homeowners association. Well, when you see, I think it was Mr. Barrera said that they were turned out by their own people. He was referring to the governance of their own organization and the people who were at the top of their own organization who were not particularly honest with them about surcharging them, and they had rules within their own organization to kick people out of the garden.
Yeah, but one could make the argument that they raised money for things that benefited everybody, whether it be a fence or some paving or
Well,
some individual.
when you're a 501c3, you're also obliged to report that and to put that on a report in the Secretary of State. And, if you look at the records, that information was
But
never there.
who determined who got to garden, what plot of land you got to garden, et cetera? Who determined that?
They had their own internal structure. See, it didn't start out that way, though. It started out with the food bank running the program, and then they, at some point, lost control of it, and it became a whole internal exercise. So there was some dissension among the group itself.
So let's assume, and I don't know this for a fact, but let's assume that there's two factions. One that, in fact, was in control of the gardens and determined who could garden whatever and was charging a fee, et cetera. And then another faction that was dissatisfied with that organization. And clearly, the faction that was in control blames you for the destruction of that urban farm, for losing the piece of property, for really devastating the farm. And
Well, that was very convenient because that played well in the media. It took about a year, possibly 2 years, for people in the media to begin to peel back the layers of what was really taking place, including the real process. And, you know, I developed relationships with a number of the farmers, and as we got to know each other better, you know, I worked with the mayor's office to create this pathway because ultimately I knew what the legal issues were and that they would have to be relocated, and so I wanted to make sure that they were taken care of. And so we found this Department of Water and Power easement. It's actually 30 miles long, but about 14 of those acres, it's a linear piece of property, were within our control within the city of Los Angeles. So even though it's a linear farm now, they have probably more acreage now than they did when they were over at 41st and Alameda. So we all worked together to make sure that they could go to the public easement and stay there forever, as long as the Department of Water and Power has, you know, the opportunity to go onto their easement.
And this means that it's property that wasn't being used in any other manner. And typically DWP easements aren't rented out or leased out to...
Sometimes they lease them out, though. You can see them, sometimes they'll lease them out to a nursery or...
Right. That's what I usually see.
Yeah, you usually see nurseries. There's one over by Fairfax, but this one was not. This one was not used. It goes all the way into the southeastern cities. It goes on for about 30 miles.
And what were your colleagues saying at that time when this was unfolding, et cetera? There tends to be an informal politics at the city council and most legislative bodies that if there's something in your district, they will kind of defer to it unless it has citywide implications or unless they get politically mobilized from some other aspect. So at first, my instinct is that people kind of didn't, your colleagues on the city council were like, okay, but as soon as it started getting heated up, they started to say, hey, Jan, what's going on? You're making us look bad. Why are you kicking the poor?
I think a lot of people didn't understand it. It was complex, you know, because it was the result of a lawsuit, and then there was a lot of screaming, and the leaders, the former leaders of this group were quite expert at working the media. One of the individuals has a planning background. I think the other one was a linguist. So they're educated, smart people, and they knew how to work it. But again, once the dust began to settle and the media began to ask more questions to have a greater understanding of what was really going on, and once the farmers like Mr. Gamboa, Mr. Barrera, and everybody began to speak and get coverage, then the conversation began to take another direction, and then we were able to move forward and find them another space.
Yeah. Where was the mayor on this? At first, he was nervous, but then he
was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, according to some of the current farmers, they think, you know, they continue to thank him and you for what happened.
He was very helpful, and he was helpful in mobilizing the resources. As the mayor, he has the authority to do that, and he was very helpful in mobilizing the ability of the Department of Water and Power to be able to allow the farmers to move on and to help them with fencing and you know, to plan the plots out. So he was helpful.
Yeah. Let's role play.
Okay.
You are Jan Perry running for mayor, and you're at your campaign office.
Jan Perry.
No. And you calling me, and I've contributed to previous elections. Okay. You call me, and I say, hello, who is this?
This is Jan Perry. Hi, Dr. Guerra. How are you?
Jan, how are you? How'd you get my number?
You know, well, you don't necessarily need to know how I got your number. I have it, so I'm here now, and I need to talk to you.
Okay, what's up?
Well, you know, I'm running for mayor.
I heard that.
So what do you think of that?
I think that's a great idea.
So you do, huh? Have you read my article in the Los Angeles magazine?
No, can't say that.
Well, you know what? Are you online right now?
No, I'm not.
Well, you know what? I'm going to send it over to your iPhone because I have your cell phone right here. So, okay, it's there now. Take a look at it.
My battery's low.
Oh, that's all right. You know what? You can look at it later. But let me tell you why I'm calling.
Okay.
And, you know, you and I have known each other for a long time, so I think I can be really direct with you. You know,
absolutely.
I need money. I need money. You need to give me a contribution so that I can get my message out.
You know, my son, he's a senior at Loyola Marymount. He doesn't work.
Yeah, but you're tenured there, so you probably get tuition remission.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay, so now you don't have to do that. Okay, go on.
Oh, you know what? I'd like to seriously consider.
Well, you know
let me
what?
think about it. I need to talk to my wife. She makes all the financial decisions.
Okay,
So,
I thought you were single.
no.
Oh, you're married?
Yeah.
Oh,
So now you're going to ask me for 2 checks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's good. All right, so, and your wife works too, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good, because let me tell you something good. The city has a program called matching funds. So if you give me 2 personal checks, the city will match it dollar for dollar up to $500. And you know, I know you're really busy, so if you want to do it with a credit card, we could do it right now.
Wow. And so how much can I give?
Well, you can give up to $1,300 per person or per company. So in your case, you could give me $1,300, and your wife could give me $1,300.
Okay, well, I will have that discussion with her because I know she's a lot more supportive of you than I am.
Really? Really? Okay, well then let's see who's going to buy dinner tonight. All right. So what I would say in conclusion is it okay if I call you in a couple of days?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
see where you stand?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What % of the times that you have the phone calls does someone say yes?
Oh, most of the time, because I usually keep people on the phone till they give up.
Yeah.
But, and you know, one thing I have learned is to be really friendly. If they say, well, you know, I think I'm supporting Bob, and I go like, you know what, that's okay. Look, if it doesn't work out for you, you know, you and I can talk again later.
Okay.
You know, and so you always keep the door open.
All right.
You know?
I want to thank Councilwoman Jan Perry for coming and talking to us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.